Today I'm going to be reading my favorite childhood books because I read a lot of books when I was a child, but to be honest, I don't remember all of them, but my favorite ones. Those are the books that I hold dear to my heart. But a lot of them I actually haven't read for a really long time, so I was like, why don't I make a video rereading some of my favorite books and seeing if they're still good and hopefully recommending them to you guys. So we'll see. The first book that I'm going to be reading is this book called 𝐦𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐬, which I absolutely love this book. Every single time I would go to the library, I would always borrow this book. I would reread it multiple times. The last time I read this book apparently was in 2017, which is wild because that was literally when I was, I think maybe like 13, 14, and I would always go and borrow it from the library, but I think the reason why I haven't read it for a while is because it wasn't available in my library, so unfortunately I couldn't read it. But I swear I read it more times than it shows up at Goodreads. This is a YA book, so technically it's not middle grades. I just read it a lot in my childhood, and because of that I really love it. And I'm glad that I have the opportunity again to pick up this book, and hopefully it is as good as I remember, because who knows, it could be just my like little child brain deceiving me, because that happens, you know. You watch something as a child, you think it's great, and then you rewatch it again when you're an adult and you're like, this wasn't as good as I thought it was. I will give you guys a short summary of this book, but honestly I don't remember that much of what happens because it's obviously been a while since I've read this book. So if I'm wrong, like, we have this girl named 𝐦𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐬 who lives in this town, this little village, and basically one day a hot guy appears with a woman who's pregnant. They're running away from this like really influential, rich, greedy man, and they escape into the village that 𝐦𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐬 lives in. And then one day his like men kind of chases them into this village, so she has to leave with them to guide her around this like wilderness because they obviously don't know the area. And I think it was something that like she had to help with the pregnant woman, because obviously the guy, what is he going to do? That's basically all I remember. I feel like I'm missing something. My memory of 𝐦𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐬 was pretty close, except the woman was not pregnant. She actually gave birth to a child already. But I, while rereading it, actually remembered so much stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, this happened. Completely forgot. Like, I remembered, I guess, the main plot points, but everything else I was like, yeah, I've completely forgot that that happened. And even with the other books, I know what they're kind of about. Like, I remember specific plot points, but I feel like when I reread them again, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, I forgot that this happened. I literally started reading this book today during uni, and I read like such a good chunk of it. I read it during class. I had some time because I skipped classes, but I had that time to read a lot of it as well. It's pretty fast to read. I don't know if it's because I just want to sit down and read it that I'm kind of flying through it, but I do think it's kind of a short book. Like, it's 300 and something pages, and it's a very simple plot to follow. I just feel like books like this are so nostalgic. Maybe it's because it's a book that I read since I was a child, and looking back it gives me a lot of comfort. But I feel like a lot of fantasy books these days are not written in the same ways. Like, the fantasy books that were published in 2010s were like the fantasy books. I really missed the writing of like, it's a little town and you're traversing throughout the woods, and there's something about that that's just so nice and familiar to read, and I miss that so much. I also really like the romance, because the romance is very, I won't say subtle, but it's kind of slow burn. I will say that 𝐦𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐬𝐬, who is the main character, is a little bit naive, and sometimes that annoys me, but I also think that she's a very strong-willed character, and she does a lot in protection of Lucien, who is the child. I finished reading 𝐸𝐸, which I absolutely loved, of course. I will say that there were aspects of this book where I was like, please. So much suspense, okay? And it was making me a little bit stressed, especially because I did not remember anything that happened until like it was revealed, so yeah. But I will say that there were points where I felt a little bit annoyed because 𝐸𝐸, she is pretty naive and it is very frustrating, but at the same time she's 16 years old and I feel like that's a very good representation of her age. Because do you know how many times a main character has been 16 years old and she's like smarter than me and like, I don't know, she could save the world, and I don't understand how that works. So I do like the representation of 𝐸𝐸's character and how true to age she is. I am excited to read the next book in the series, probably won't right now because I have completely forgotten what happens apparently. The next book that I'm going to be reading is The Golden Door, which is part of the Three Doors trilogy. This book is written by Emily Rodda, who, I don't know if you guys know her, but she's literally like the most iconic Australian author in my opinion. She wrote the Del Toro's Quest series. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but I kind of learned of it through the anime that was made. But I absolutely love this series so much. They are really short, but they're really good because they're packed with so much information despite it being very short. So the Three Doors trilogy is another series written by her, and this is also another series that I really love. Basically, from what I remember, it's about this like town, kind of reminds me of Attack of Titan, where there's like wars and every single night there are these beasts that flies in. When that happens, you have to like hide into your house. But basically in this like place there are three doors, and the men in this village kind of volunteered to go through these doors. And to go through these doors you are looking for how these beasts are, I guess, being made, or who is controlling them to try and stop them from invading their village. That's kind of all I remember, but now I'm thinking, is this the actual plot of this book, or is this a plot of like the other book that I read? Because I remember some stuff, but is it like the right book? I don't know. I really like Emily Rodda's writing because, like I said, she packs a lot of punch. In her books, there's always some like twists and reveals, and I love it so much. It's always very interesting to read. And also, her characters are always those characters where they are kind of the underdog and later they rise above everyone else. It's kind of like they assume that the character is like the weakest, and when they become the character that kind of saves everyone, I don't know, something about that is just like super satisfying to read. Oh, by the way, this is a middle grade series, so it is not okay. Well, apparently it's middle grade and young adult. I don't really know, but I would define it as like middle grade series. And the last time I read this book was in 2018. What's going on in the month of March, but I literally have read so many books and that just makes me feel so good, so hopefully I keep it up. I did read a good chunk of The Golden Door, which I'm a little bit surprised about because I knew I was going to read this book quite quickly, but I didn't realize it was going to be this fast. Like 𝐸𝐸, my recollection of this book was also pretty similar to the short description that I gave of this book, which at least my memory is not as bad as I thought it was. Like 𝐸𝐸, there is something that's really nostalgic about this book. And again, I don't know if it's because I read it when I was younger and it's like so comforting, but it's also this idea of going on an adventure, going on a quest, which I feel like not a lot of books have nowadays. Maybe it's because it's kind of middle grade, kind of YA, but I just love books like that. Like, I cannot explain. And I feel like with a lot of high fantasy or maybe YA fantasy books, the vibe is completely different from this book and 𝐸𝐸. They have like the aspects of fantasy, but there is no quests and going on an adventure. Like, the vibes are completely different. I'm nearly halfway through the book, but we are still kind of in the beginning, but I know it's gonna move pretty quickly, and I have under an hour left before I finish reading this book, which I'm very, very excited about. I finished reading The Golden Door, which it was such a fast, fun read. It's very focused on the adventure and the quest, and I wouldn't say that there were plot twists, but there were things that were like definitely happening, and it felt very fast paced, which was nice to read. It does continue on to like the next series, and I feel like it connects straight away. That makes sense. Like there's no breaks in between the series. From where it ends, we basically start off with that in the next book, and I would say that the next couple books in the series is where the plot twists and the revelations occur, but I felt like this book was a really great introduction to the series. And I don't know, I really love the like fantasy quest adventure element of this book. So if you want something that is like fast and light, kind of as like a palate cleanser, something that's easy to read but also really entertaining, I definitely recommend this book. The next book that I'm going to be reading is 𝐸∐𝐸𝐬𝐻, which is another book that I love. I actually went to the author's book signing and I got some of my books signed by her, which was amazing. However, I can't really show you because my books are stored away, which is very, very sad. But I was so excited because I never had that opportunity before to get my book signed by an author, so it was really great. Also, like the book covers in this series are absolutely beautiful. They are so stunning, and this is like a 5-book one series. The first book is about this girl named Alex who goes to this boarding school because her parents, I don't really know, but they kind of abandon her because they work in like the archaeology scene and they have to go like traveling and stuff like that, which her parents were always like a weird thing to me. But she gets sent to a boarding school and then she opens this door to like a library or something, and she gets transported into this whole different world which is full of magic, and there's like a boarding school, and in that school they teach her magic and stuff like that. It's very much like the chosen one, and she has to do different things because like she's the chosen one basically. So in the end she has to kind of work together to defeat the bad guy. I feel like it is very cliche, and I'm interested to see if I would give it like a high star rating like I did before, because I do remember in the past thinking that the writing I think was not my favorite. Certain scenes, the way that the characters were written, I think wasn't my favorite. So I'm interested to see if I would feel the same way. I will say that the romance in this book is like so good. It's very much so bad. They don't really get together until, I don't know, like the last book, the second last book. But basically there are so many scenes where you can tell that they like each other and everyone else knows. They don't want to admit that they like each other, so they're kind of just like slowly flirting with each other but not like fully admitting it. I don't know, like I love that. It's so cute. I hate when the romance moves too quickly, but I like with this one that it's obvious that they like each other, but like it's slow moving as well. So I think the whole romance and the fantasy element of this book is my favorite bits. What irks me about this book is the fact that they're always described to be like happy and like laughing and grinning, and I'm like, what are you happy about? But honestly I just savor it because I know what happens in the future books, and I know not everything remains happy. But I think it's the friendship between them and the way that it is written is kind of weird, because why are they always described to be like grinning at each other and they're playing jokes with each other and everything, but it's not funny. Like a lot of the times it places her in danger, and I just think that the way that their relationship is written, their dynamic is kind of weird. Like I love the characters, I love Jordan and Bear, but the way that they interact with each other, the way that it is written puts me off, and I think that was my issue with the book. And I think that's what I kind of mentioned before, feeling like something about the writing was putting me off, and I think it was this part of it. Would I consider this book as good as the first time I read it? I I'm not sure. I feel like I'm really biased towards this series and this author, so I would be like, yeah, I still love it so much. But I think after reading it again and really thinking about it, I feel like the first book isn't like the best out of all of them. It's definitely setting up the plot for the whole series and the world. So most of this book is just us getting introduced to this new world and the different characters and kind of, I guess, the background for what's leading to the rest of the series. So the rest of the series does get like a lot darker and the plots get more interesting, which I feel like happens a lot in fantasy books that have very long series. With the first book, I felt like it was a good introduction, but at the same time I did get a little bit bored, which I think was my main issue with the book. And it's not because I was rereading it, it was just like something about it. I think there was not a lot going on. We were just in school. It was very repetitive, and because of that I got a little bit bored. I am excited to read the rest of the series though, because I know that it will be good. And look, there are certain scenes that I remember reading and I cannot wait to read them again. It's interesting to have been able to read my favorite childhood books and looking back and seeing whether or not they're still good. I think overall I really enjoyed all the books that I read in this video, and I'm really happy that they're still as good as I remembered them to be. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to, of course, and I'll see you guys in another one. Bye!